If people are on Mars when Mashiach comes, what happens to those people?
Okay, keep just.
Let's go.
I have two questions. The first is all of the crazy things that we say about the pyramids, how the pyramids are like facing no human technology could have built it, and that. Where does that fit into the fact that we built them? Did Hashem have us build it unknowingly, like so perfectly that I don't know?
Good question, yeah.
And then the black holes that we didn't address last week. Black holes through a Jewish lens.
First, and then let's questions.
Okay. Yeah, cool question. I'll answer them in order. Yeah.
And basically, his question is: says no Hebrew slave left Mitzrayim. I believe they had control of Ares, or the calf that we shechted, their god. And that was like a cell site. It was like a negative force field with the Sphinx and the pyramids. They control the constellation. That's why no Jews went Egypt. Is that true? That's his. I'm going to add on to his question.
Right.
I have my own question.
Yes.
It says that prophecy went to crazy people, children, and animals. Is that because no one believes crazy people, children, and animals?
Animals don't think it says crazy people and children. It says
not animals too.
Well, it said I'm trying to Gemara and Baba Basra. We have Nidda Nevume Menavim Nitanola.
And what type, is it a prophecy by a Shin Dalet or a prophecy that's pure?
Hey, is this for you?
It doesn't even have what the full level of prophecy. It's children shouting. It's Gemara and Baba Basra. It's that you're the base. Let me quickly look up actually a bit.
So I should go ask the crazy person alive.
Like that.
1 second.
Did you hear that?
Then what is it?
Prophecy went to children, crazy people, and I think animals. You ever see an animal? I took a big person walking the dog in the street. I see them in Manhattan all the time. The dog just stops. You can't even drag it. I said to that, you better listen to that dog. You know you're right. And they go in the opposite direction. Think about Bilam's donkey or whatever.
Well, maybe it's just like would you say intuition?
Well,
Intuition is like, so like
to,
if you could be purely in your intuition, would that be a prophet? Like,
prophecy doesn't exist since the temple was destroyed, but it went some level of prophecy went to crazy people, children.
Who said this?
Who said this? Our tradition.
No, but what was the source?
What's the what?
The source.
That's the Gemara.
We killed.
I believe it's
Baba
a
Basra. It's
Gemara.
Baba Basra. It's Baba Basra. It's Baba Basra. I can look up the slide. It's in Baba Basra. I think it's like I said. Sugi starts with your base. And with base, I'll tell you what.
Should we ask Rabbi? That's Rabbi ChatGPT.
You can ask. It might hallucinate for you though. Doesn't tend to do such things.
Get this in ChatGPT. It's called Insta Rabbi.
Yeah. No, show it to me to know, because that's what I said. I got the quote right. It was to show it to imbeciles and children, not animals.
Okay. Imbeciles.
Show it to people who are unwell, mentally unwell. Crazy people. Yeah. Good. Okay. Let's go. So what else?
That's weird.
It's not so weird. I explain it.
Okay.
It's not weird because they can say crazy things and some of them can be true.
But why give it to them?
Because the rational brain is a filter that will have to block it.
What?
Okay, we'll talk about that. We'll get that. Good. What else fights us? Anything else you want to throw into the
Here, I'll throw one more.
Another one, okay.
So at what point does like messing with Hashem's physics and laws of creation, at what point does it get too far to a point where it's like putting an AI chip in your brain? Like, is that like how disgusting of an act is that? How disgusting of an act is that?
Don't change what you're gonna say.
Thank you. Put it nearer to me if you want.
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay, so let's go round in order. Let's start. Which one do we start with? Who was first? It was.
Mine was the first with the Mars.
Mars. Okay. So the question there at the beginning is, if Mashiach comes and someone's on Mars, what happens? That's not in principle different if they're stuck on a Polynesian island either. Right. So the bottom line is that it's what actually when Mashiach comes. So there's different interpretation. Is part of the immediate messianic process that all Jews end up in the land of Israel, in which case they have to come as quickly as they can, or is it they have to turn up at the first Yom Tov? Right. It's an interesting question. It seems part of what we daven for. If you look in the Amidah, we pray for the return of all the Jews to the land before we pray for Mashiach. So it seems that the Jews have been living here as citizens before. Now, do you have to then? You have to get on the plane probably as quickly as you can, get as fast as you can, but you don't have to be here till the first Pesach. The first actual, well, I shouldn't say, really supposed to be here for the first Yom Tov, because every Yom Tov you're meant to all come up to the Beis Hamikdash, right? Pesach, you absolutely have to be here, because you've got to shech the korban Pesach and eat it. So the Pesach offering, because without that, a person gets cut off from the Jewish people. So that and circumcision, the only positive commands where they're cut off for the world to come. To do them, so that person have to be here. So as long as they can get here, and if they can't get here by then they're called B'derech Rechoko. They're called they're too far away. They have to get the Pesach Sheni, have a second chance. If not, they have to get as soon as they can. So if they've booked their ticket and if they're gone on the Enoch, or who's it first going to build the space thing in Mars, and they're there, then fine. Then they have to keep the mitzvahs up there and get as soon as they can back to Earth, back to Yerushalayim.
If they can't.
So if they can't, they can't. And then they can tell anyone else. What happens if they try to get and they die on the way? No different. If you can't, you can't. It's to all mitzvahs. If you physically can't do it, you're exempt. But you shouldn't put yourself in a situation. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Let's ask it slightly differently. Suppose. Let me play it like this. Suppose there was somewhere where if you would go in a spaceship to some planet, it's a one-way ticket basically. You'll not be able to get back with a given technology. You could put people on a rocket. They could build a home for them or something on, let's say, Jupiter. But during our lifetimes, we will not be able to get to Earth. Would they be allowed to go? Because if Mashiach comes to the Beis Hamikdash, they won't be able to get there.
But also, it's like in the time of Mashiach, it starts physical, and I believe it gets more spiritual.
That's called the world to come. That's a separate issue.
So what happens if you're on Mars in the world to come?
The world is spiritual and connect everything. By then, we'll maybe link it back to some of your other question about technology soon, because that's likely to have some impact. Okay, so that would be an interesting question. Could you take a one-way ticket up there, knowing that if Mashiach comes, you'll never be able to make it back down again? It's an interesting question. What does never mean? Technologies can change.
Yeah.
So that theoretically, there might be a halachic problem. Putting yourself in a situation where you could never come to the Beis Hamikdash, that could be a potential issue. Other than that, there'd be no problem being on Mars. It would be no different than going on a holiday on, let's say, a cruise ship, where if you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you can't get back here quickly. Okay, then came the pyramids for second.
Pyramids.
So you should know a very important thing. It is true that we could not build pyramids nowadays with their technology. That's very true. I don't think it's true to say that we are completely baffled by it, right? Meaning, the fact that we don't exactly, you don't need to get to pyramids, that you've got the big, huge stones in Stonehenge that are 5,000 years old, right? No, now, with modern technology, we could do it. It would be difficult, but we could do it. How did they do it? All likelihood, they built gigantic rafts and put it down rivers mostly, right? How did they schlep it on land? Very difficult. Possibly lots and lots of rollers, lots and lots of people putting it. Pyramids, we do have a better idea now. I think they're pretty close to having an idea of exactly how they did it. It's an immense amount of human ingenuity given the level of sophistication they didn't have, right? There's no evidence that they had like electricity or something or aliens coming down to help them build it.
Right.
But it shows you how an empire or state dedicating serious resources can discover laws of geometry, Greeks had all sorts of brilliant devices to calculate angles of things far away. They figured out the Earth is round, or at least semi-spherical. They figured a lot of things out using very rudimentary, relative to what we have, mathematical tools, and studying the laws of geometry and mathematics and deducing all sorts of amazing, all of Euclid's elements, all the things they deduced. So Greeks could do it, Rome, before then Egyptians and Mesopotamians could do a lot of very impressive things, and then marshalling labor forces of immense amounts of people, and they're willing to have them die while building this stuff. It's incredible what they built. The pyramids weren't built overnight. In other words, it wasn't that one day they built the Giza pyramids. Pyramids were being built for a long time before then, and each one built a bigger pyramid, and a bigger pyramid, and a bigger pyramid. So they were accumulating knowledge and power, and then going for the next project up. So that's what I would say. In terms of these miracle stories, they're facing force fields with sphinxes. What's that? Aliens. I don't think there's enough. I wouldn't rule out the possibility of aliens existing, but I don't think the evidence is too strong against it. Now, in the Torah, we have the concept of the Tower of Babel, not the concept, the actual story. And I think I've explained to you before, everything in the first 11 chapters could occur at a central spiritual level that manifests in many places on Earth at the same time. So there is an actual physical Tower of Babel, the ziggurats, but it's possible that a similar thing was happening, like almost like a spirit came into the world around those times and gave people this tremendous sense of ability and drive to build these mega structures, because we do see them in different civilizations. So that may well be, not almost at the same time, by the way. Pyramids may have been the same sort of time as the Babylonians. What it does mean is, if the Israelites the Hebrews, when they were down in Egypt, were far enough inland, they would have seen them. I don't know if they came that how far inland they came, right? I don't know if they got, because they were probably mostly in the delta, in the eastern delta area, Avaris and places like that, named actually after Hebrews, so which later became called Ramses, exactly as the Torah says, the city of Ramses. So that's more likely where they were. So whether they've seen them or not is an interesting question, but they're around for a long time. But they are baffling on the one hand, but they're not like they had some super duper technology. They secretly harnessed nuclear power and all these other great not conspiracy theories, but those sorts of things.
If King Solomon had the Shamir, would they not have had maybe something?
Yeah,
no.
possible. If we take the Shamir story as a literal story, remember it's a Gemara, and unlike biblical stories, Talmudic stories do not have to be literal. And often could, but yes, could be there. It's not impossible they had special technologies, but I think we have enough evidence of enough understanding how it is physically possible to do, even if there's still a few gaps. Like I'm sure you can find now. When I studied archaeology a bit, I did one course once, not as part of a degree, just in the days when you could do Open University for free in England or for cheap. I studied archaeology. And I remember at the time they'd already closed a lot of these gaps in knowledge of how to do pyramids. That's 15 years ago or so. So I'm sure by now they could watch a video where they have almost the whole thing sorted. Doesn't mean there aren't things to discover still, but the basic plan of these because they believe that these gigantic ramps that could have been taken away later, some which they seem to have found the evidence for. So it's true, given the current pyramid, if that was all they had, they wouldn't have been able to build it, right? But you could build ramps very high up that get you to layer the next layer, and then you could raise the elevation. You keep doing things like that.
Yeah.
Okay. What was our next question? Was
Black
black
holes.
holes. Now remind me the black hole question. Because
Yeah. I asked through what lens do we see black holes? I kind of linked it to the Kabbalah, like the ultimate receiver,
giving,
nothing gives. So is it like a bad?
So it is true that we do believe, or many people say, that the physical world is a map of the spiritual world, right? Not only Kabbalists say that, the Rambam says it. Part of his very strong hypothesis in the Guide to the Complex is that the reason God made such a law-like world is so that you could trace deeper roots, and then deeper roots, and they all parallel each other all the way up. That's his basic hypothesis. And so yes, the idea that within the physical world, very strong phenomena should be expressive of spiritual things is very likely to be correct. What exactly a black hole replicates, it could be something like you say, something's only a taker, not a giver. It could be that it's a parallel to the concept of singularity. There's lots of things it could be. Right? It certainly is but I personally don't like speculating too much on this. I used to like doing these speculations. As the more you learn in Kabbalistic stuff, the more you learn physics, the more you realize these things are always more complicated than they seem. When you think it all lines up, it means you're probably looking a bit superficially. You may be right, anyone may be right doing that, but there'll always be, as you rip it open, another layer still to go. So I can't say with any definitive certainty a good answer to your question. I apologize. But the premise, I think, is a legitimate premise. The premise is correct. That one should be able to ascertain. Even the fact that, I know it sounds very simple, but the fact that if you travel at the speed of light, the entire universe has no more space or time to it. That's a very powerful thing. It means the entire space-time that we experience is because we're not light. If you think about that on a very, very deep level, physical light obviously symbolizes spiritual light. Space-time means separation and brokenness, and they're related to, if we were completely at God's light, there would be no separation. So you definitely feel these things in the laws of physics that mirrors a spiritual concept, right? But exactly what to land where I would be too. People try to say that there are four fundamental forces, parallel the four spiritual worlds, or maybe the four spiritual elements. Or could well be. The Rambam says the number 4 appears a lot in the physical universe and the spiritual universe, and reflect. Although the Rambam said black and white, based on another chapter he writes, it probably reflects the 4 letters of God's name. So again, you could say 10, all these sorts of things. But me personally, I'm not. Don't feel the sufficient expertise to tie the knots.
Interesting.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up on that, you said that if God light represents the lack of separation, but then how come light isn't infinitely fast? Light has a speed, so that means there is still a separation of light that
Good. Light has a speed from our perspective.
Okay.
We clock it moving at certain speeds. If you switch a light on, it will take time from our perspective to hit something. If you were traveling with the light itself, which obviously you can't do, then literally all space and time would just collapse. There just would be no space and time. Everything, you would be everywhere, or everywhere would be where you are. Every moment would be where you are.
Wait, so Rabbi, if a person were to travel at the space at the
Speed of light.
everything would just, that's it. It would
You
end.
can't travel. The whole point is, what happens is the closer you get to the speed of light, the more you accelerate, the more everything starts to
Bubble.
basically, space and time themselves warp, and you become dense too. So at a certain point, you can't actually, unless you stop your view, you can't travel at the speed of light. Yeah.
So Hashem created a blockade, essentially.
Well, it has to. Remember, the universe is disunity. That's how we exist. That's how we have a sense of self. We're disunified from God. Right? It's essential that the universe is separation for us to exist, and it's even more essential that it splits again for us to have separate senses of self. Okay, what was the next question after that? What did we
I
have?
think it was this question.
Which was your question was not the one about the Giza and things which you added onto his.
I think it was like they controlled the Mausoleum, and that's where the Jews were told to kill their god.
Yeah.
And they
Okay.
controlled the Mausoleum because no one escaped. It wasn't Alcatraz.
It wasn't Alcatraz. Again, you're right about that. You're talking about in Egypt.
The second question was about. Oh, you answered the first one.
Yeah. So, but just again, so you should, one thing you should understand in the ancient world. This is just also important to know. I'm not disagreeing with you. They had some kind of link to the spiritual worlds, and certainly they believed in the Mazolos, in the zodiac and the zodiac of the sheep, which is part of the symbolism of shechting the Korban Pesach, shechting the sheep, which is in that month, which was the month of the Tilaz, the sheep. But as well as that. Yeah, it was very difficult in the ancient world to move. You could literally have laws just banning people move. Most of history, physically moving from one place to another. In lots of feudal systems, you had this where peasants were not allowed to move. Moving wasn't like you just clicked your fingers, packed your bags, and
The
ran.
Jews weren't allowed. They didn't escape.
Correct. They didn't escape. They couldn't escape. I just want to explain to you how difficult things were in the ancient world, because it's very, very crucial to understand this. Moving was dangerous, because you had to have food provisions, you had to know where you were going. If you were not a traveller, you didn't necessarily know where to go to next. If you didn't have organised, if there's imperial trade routes and you don't know them and no one's escorting you, you don't even know where to go to get food and water. That's the main reason people could die on a journey because of lack of food and water. Also injuries from the journey, things going wrong, people being exhausted, illness. There's a lot of stuff that happened. When Jews were expelled from countries, very often lots of them died in the first year. They believe thousands died in Morocco when they're expelled from Spain, and that was literally just coming across the water because there's no agriculture set up, no food infrastructure set up, and without food you die. So travel was really, really difficult, and typically there were only a few trade routes you could go on, and they could be guarded very easily. Someone could stop you leaving. So that's why people, generally speaking, didn't escape. Slave populations couldn't easily escape. They couldn't take food with them. They didn't have transport mechanism. They didn't have access to the donkeys. They didn't know the trade routes to go down. And if they would find the trade routes, there'd be military bases along the way and fortresses, and it would just be incredibly difficult to do. In fact, that's what the Torah emphasized this week, that God didn't send them the northern route, right? Because that sea wall go down to Egypt, and some learn that means the Philistines will attack them, and some will be there's huge military bases, Egyptian fortresses along that route. So God took them a different route, etc. So. Yeah, that's in terms of that. Now, you may well be right that they still had some spiritual powers which the Israelites let go of. But your next question after that, what was the second? Not that one. Not
Prophecy given to Christians.
prophecy. Yeah, given to children of crazy people. So really, my understanding is that this. The other thing you see about prophecy, again, what the question was for those who missed it is the Talmud says from the day the temple was destroyed, prophecy was removed from the prophets, and it was given either to crazy people, crazy mentally unwell, or to children. There is another place that describes how in a dream you can get a 60th of prophecy. So it seems like this prophecy is a flow from the inner worlds to the outer world. In the inner world, if something has been programmed to happen in the outer world, sometimes it can flow in before it actually happens, and therefore a person who's got a channel connected to the spiritual world could absorb that and become aware of it, could absorb God's message and become aware. And usually the purpose of prophecy is to warn the people or tell the people, by the way, something's ready to happen because of your sins, change ways and you can avert it. Right? That's the goal of it. Now, it's now it's gone, which means God isn't flowing the stuff in. However, it still is there. Just that what usually happens is there's a natural barrier between our world and the higher world, and the natural barrier is that any consciousness in this world is locked into this world and can't sense things in a higher world. Okay? Because the worlds are naturally apart. But a consciousness that doesn't quite operate in this world, or isn't fully developed in this world, may actually, paradoxically enough, be a portal for the spiritual part of the person that has access to the higher world. So a person who's not competent mentally in this world may accidentally blurt out things that are actually coming from a deeper message, or that they wouldn't have a sense of that. And that's why a person whose mental competency is missing, ironically enough, in the madness of things they say, might actually also be saying things that are true. Of course, we'll never know till after it happens. But, you know, when the people are screaming all over the streets of the world, the end is nigh, the end is nigh, the end is nigh, and when the end really is nigh, they might actually pick that up and say it, but we would never know the difference in what they say is true and what they say is false, and they wouldn't know either. So that's more that type of concept. By the way, it's part of the reason why in sleep, when your brain is switched off, but the dream mind is active, tiny vestiges of prophetic things can leak in, if you like, as well. Because the soul is always active, and the soul has access to much higher realms. But the minute it translates into a conscious brain, it's cut off. And therefore there can be a spiritual impetus, but not actual access to clear information from a higher level. Whereas a prophet could build their place up, their conscious mind up, and it could be a receptacle for actual real information from a higher world. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, great, good. What was after this?
So, just to build on my question, so when people start putting chips in their brain and
Yes.
are able to...
Are you the next question? That's
Yeah,
what
yeah. But also, what happens when a person's able to put a chip in their brain, essentially analyze everything in the Torah, and basically just, that's a cheat code, right? Like, you can just become a cheat code.
So let's start with the way you phrased the question first, which is, at which point technology, are we allowed to advance in it, not allowed to advance in it? There's a Medrash Tanchuma, it's one of the classical ancient Midrashim, ancient rabbinic, non-legal writings, that talks about a debate between a Roman governor called Turnus Rufus and Rabbi Akiva. And the Roman governor challenges Rabbi Akiva and says to him, what's greater, the work of God or the work of man? So we would assume, since Rabbi Akiva is a rabbi, he's obviously going to say the work of God, right? But he doesn't. He takes out a stalk of wheat and he says, this is the work of God, and he takes out bread or cake and says, this is the work of man. And what is the meaning of that Medrash? The meaning seems to be like this. He's saying, look, God created this amazing thing, wheat. We can't create wheat. I mean, even right now, we're on the cusp. We probably will be able to soon. But even then, we can't create the raw materials that it's built out of, the laws of physics that it's dependent upon. But certainly back then, no way could you dream of building wheat. Even today, we can't yet do it. So that's an amazing thing, but you can't eat wheat. So God has created a world with incredible potential. It's an unbelievable creation we couldn't replicate. But you have to take that raw material and transform it to fully develop its potential. And think what a smartphone is. You've taken the mud and rock metals of planet Earth, moved them around a little bit, taken the electromagnetic radiation flowing through planet Earth, taken other materials of planet Earth, put them in space, move these things around, and suddenly you get this. And then you get AI, and you get, right? What we're doing is in essence the same thing as taking wheat and turning it into bread, just on a more sophisticated basis.
It's an idol of stone.
It's an idol if you worship it, but bread is not an
I'm
idol.
talking about the cell phone. It's from glass. It's from sand.
Yeah, sure. But what the incredible thing is, you go back 1,000 years ago and tell people that mud could be intelligent, they would think you're crazy.
Right.
Unless you think, actually we should have realized
Well,
mud.
Adam means from
Adam is from Adama, from the ground, and anyone who would have thought about it deeply would realize, of course, mud can be intelligent because we are reconstituted mud.
Could that be evolution also disguised?
There may be aspects of it, yeah. Remember, every cell in our body was once in the mud. It got swallowed up by a plant and turned into plant cells, and then into an animal, and then into us. But it's just intelligent. We are just intelligent mud. And so is this.
Is Bereshit, is that God's called Bereshit? Is that the Big Bang?
It could be the Big Bang, could actually be just after the Big Bang, could be a spiritual dimension higher than the Big Bang, but all of these things are unlinked. But here's the important point. So yes, God has known all along in creation what is waiting to be revealed. Creation is waiting to reveal God. Could chips in our brain help do that? Very likely. Very, very likely. And what happens at the end? What happens anyway when we hit total consciousness of God? Right? if we upgrade ourselves, which means that the world is waiting for us to be upgraded, which is something we've been talking about for thousands of years as Jews, that we know is going to happen. We're going to return to God and the meeting consciousness and all this kind of stuff. If all this happens, fine, that's how God's going to generate the end of days. He could do it without technology, he could do it through miracle, but he can also do it through technology, which was the miracle that it was sitting on the mother planet Earth all along. The rocks and mother planet Earth reconfigured. Just, yeah.
Well, okay, how about, is that the end of the question?
It's
Maybe we don't ask
ridiculous.
questions.
Yeah.
Wait, so you think chips are a way for us to reach this level of complete
Look,
consciousness?
let's say what we know and let's say what we don't know. We know that there's going to be a thing called Mala Oretz Dei Aish Hashem. The whole world is full of the knowledge of God. We know that right now the human being can't really have that. Okay? We know that we can have a lot of knowledge of God, but very limited. There's all sorts of things we can't access or get our head around or can't. Even when we talk about God, our brain just gets completely stuck. We know that in the end of times, we men all become one big soul that's interconnected, and those who live good lives will also be individually conscious. So we know there's got to be lots of shifts and lots of things happening. How they'll happen, God may have lots of ways. Right? We know there's a debate whether it's miraculous or not. So Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, who was a prolific writer, amazing guy, he's a Baal Teshuvah in the 1970s, who was on America's Who's Who of young physicists, who then became a religious Jew, and wrote tons. He died like in his very early 40s, and he wrote so much and did it without computers. Amazing memory, amazing knowledge, amazing. And he had this beautiful, interesting idea where he speculated maybe technology is God's way of making miraculous outcomes with non-miraculous inputs. So he may be right. I can't tell you that for sure, but it certainly is looking increasingly likely that could be the bridge. Yeah.
So would you say then that it's just like all things, that we can take the food that we can create, but we can also be gluttonous and use it for bad reasons? So in this idea of having like your cell phones installed and browsing the web through your eyes, and people, and that's right. In that sense, you're separating yourself from any capacity to be aware of spiritual sensitivity.
Technology can
Right,
be a disaster.
right,
No question.
okay.
It increases the power of the world, which increases the power of good and the power of bad.
Right.
There is no question a very likely trajectory for lots of human beings is to be in virtual worlds for the rest of their life.
Yes.
Which
Okay.
means they'll ultimately be living in a cupboard, being intravenously kept alive until such time as their body dies, if
Yeah.
it does, and they'll be programming these things to be in virtual worlds. Now, that might be very exciting for a while. At some point, maybe the body will run out of how many chemicals it can pound the brain with
Yeah.
and the mind with, and then it could turn into a horror show. But people might get stuck in it. You can actually imagine it being a film
Right.
again.
There's a movie, Bruce Willis, Surrogates. That's exactly on the premise.
I'm not up to date about all these movies.
There's an old movie, old movie.
Yeah.
Anyway,
What do you say about
Exactly
what
that.
we talked
I'm saying it's a trajectory. It's certainly a possibility lots of human beings in the next few years are going to end up like this. But the more positive usage of it will be that we enhance
Yeah.
our mind power to enter realms of consciousness and
Yeah.
spirituality that we can't currently do. Now,
Amazing.
the problem people will have, you can already see why the rabbis talk about people in the place that if this is going to enter the world to come, or the Messianic era first, I'll take the question soon, and the world to come second, the problem you can imagine is if you become ultra conscious of God, but you lived against God all your life, you won't be able to sustain yourself in that realm.
about? Say it again?
If you become ultra conscious of God as our creator, and we didn't live lives in consonance with God, then we won't be able to sustain ourselves in that world.
Like the vessel will break.
Right, exactly, the vessel break. In other words, when we say people can't make it to the world to come, it's not God being vindictive, it's just a reality. You cannot make it in the place of total consciousness of God if you live against God.
You can't go to tefillin land if you didn't put on tefillin.
Right. In other words, exactly, yeah. So all the consciousness of that stage will be, because there'll be nothing more to do, is what we did until now. Is what we did
It's
until
going
now.
to Disneyland and not getting on Magic Mountain.
Whichever way you put it, right. So that's how we have to make sure to live godly lives here already, and live lives also that we can, very high level of interconnection with other people, because that will be the state of consciousness as well. So we want to make sure all these things are parallel. Okay, what else? Yeah.
You guys
Sorry, he has hand. Sorry, you both again. Okay, we'll take both questions and then.
I was just going to ask quickly, did you ever know the poem All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace by Richard Brautigan?
No.
You don't know that? Okay, it's basically all the way back from the 1960s, and I sort of read it in an intro of an essay written by the CEO of Anthropic, the guys who made Claude, and it's basically a poem that kind of is like a technological, ecological combination, and it really made me think like, is this like what Mashiach's talking about?
Wow.
I don't know. I'll show you. Like,
Thank you, please do. Thank you. Yeah.
I think I saw something like probably like a 60-second clip, so it couldn't have been your whole opinion on the matter, but it was in particular, I think it was particularly speaking about Nick Fuentes and his growth being primarily artificial. But I feel like I've spent a lot of time on the internet. I know these trends, and I can see a lot of it is highly organic. And I just want to know what your point of view on the matter is, and if it's really getting worse or not. But I can also see it in the day-to-day. Like in New York, it's not.
For a few things. First of all, you don't have 5 million followers if they're all bots. That's generally speaking how things go. So even if 90% of them are bots, there's a lot of people who are really real followers there. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I do think is likely to be the case. And it's an NCRI report. What he's commenting on is a video I made where I was talking about an NCRI report, National Contagion Research Institute, that found a lot of evidence of bot magnification of people like Nick Fuentes. But one should know that he's existed for a very long time. But he existed at a fringe with followers, with thousands and thousands of followers. Since the war began, he suddenly exploded. Now, part of that will be the explosion of Israel hate. Part of it will be that, let's say, Muslims will have discovered, and part of it has been let up back onto X. But all these are factors. But we don't know. Part of the challenge of studying the virtual world is it's very, very difficult to tell the difference between a sophisticated AI bot and a human. Even if someone's arguing with you back and forth online, you don't know you're actually speaking to a human and not a very good Chinese bot, right? So you will, and how much our brains know that when they actually interact with us, we always think we're interacting with a human. So that's the famous Turing test, which is definitely not true. Alan Turing used to say that you will know when a machine is conscious when it can replicate conscious behavior, and you can't tell the difference. The Turing test has been passed long ago. So we actually will not know right now how many followers and how many people are humans and how many are not. It will happen is humans, there's definitely been an explosion of anti-Semitism, no question. It also, even if the number of anti-Semites never changes, people who held anti-Semitic views, once they believe millions of others hold them, will feel very confident to say them. And there's not likely to be a punishment because you can't fire everybody. Like a few years ago, accusing Israel of genocide, people might have said that's such an outrageous, disgraceful thing to do that you can lose your job in a firm because you're anti-Semitic. If you did that today, who's going to be employed where? You're like, you'd shut down every single university and be left with the last 3 students. So you can't do this. So that's what it does. And humans think in tribes and groups, not individually. We're all convinced we think individually, but we think in waves. And the faster a social wave moves, the more people it sweeps along with it. So everybody has that tipping point in which they would tip to the majority. Maybe there's a few outliers who would never tip. Lots of people can resist, say 70% of a population thinking a certain way. Most people can't resist 90% of the population thinking a certain way, 99%. It's very hard to resist things. If you just think, for example, in the last few years, how fast people have moved in mega trends, Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, trans, he, him, to now this conservative backlash. And you get a lot of people who just a few years ago who went from posting Black Lives Matter things after George Floyd things to now they've never posted it. Because what happened? Society just moved.
Yeah.
Right? So now you've got the Palestinian, maybe in 5 years' time that will be embarrassing for people.
Yeah.
Things can move. Today, what you undergo is a 100-year or 30-year revolution in 2 years. So are you right that even if it's 90% organic, it will still have the potential to have enormous real influence in the real world. That's part of its genius and power.
Who's Nick Fuentes? Is that right?
Nick Fuentes is the right-wing guy. He's one of the very famous
Did he
ones.
get thrown in jail or something?
No.
What is he anti-Israel?
Yeah.
Right wing.
He's a
Trump.
Nazi. He said he's very, very pro-America.
All right.
Pro-America. It's
Right
like,
wing.
America first. Yeah.
he's just like a super, super
Well, so
white
is
guy,
Trump.
born and raised. No, but it's
Yeah,
he hates Jews.
And he looks like
And he hates everybody.
He looks like an immigrant himself, right?
No, he's
Mexican.
There's other ones
He's
like
Mexican.
that. Yeah, he's
His last name is Fuentes.
probably Jewish.
He's anti-immigrant?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's anti-racist, anti-everything. Can I ask what would be your suggestion as a Jew? I find myself voting time on the internet, but I want to stray away from. Honestly, I find the guy funny, and I'm like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? I find myself in that.
By the way, it's a very important thing. You should know, not anti-Semites. We love to believe they are basically people who grow horns and are monsters and evil, fanatical, crazy people. I'll guarantee this: nobody in this room has ever heard an Adolf Hitler speech. right? But we've seen him go, and that's it. And that was designed to make us, and that's subconsciously designed by all of us, to make us feel there's something monstrous about him. Now I'm going to tell you something scary. If you listen to that Adolf speech,
I watched that in English.
it sounds like Nick Fuentes. It's very, sometimes his earlier stuff is, okay, I could hear that. Right? And the reason that I think we made a big mistake with Holocaust education, because we were so scared of the stuff reigniting that we silenced the education that happened in the 1920s and 30s. If you walk into any Holocaust museum, you see mass crowds of mesmerized people in the first scene, all go, oh, Heil Hitler, right? And we think, okay, that doesn't happen in our country. Yeah, but not in that exact right. And they were the villains, like the Star Wars stormtroopers. Literally, stormtroopers, the Sturm.
Yeah.
This was the Germans. They all look the same. They're still immaculate uniforms. They're not humans. This was a reassurance mechanism to us that these. It was almost like saying Nazis are so vile. Partly because after the war there were still a lot of Nazis around the world, including in America. And we wanted it to be, so, and not consciously, but people educated about the Holocaust wanted it to be Nazis are people who come to kill masses of Jews. But actually, there's a subtlety in the 1920s and 30s, that's not how it went. It started with a big movement of people talking about how, especially Germany, how Germany had been ruined because of World War I, the Versailles Treaty, and been humiliated, and Jewish bankers had benefited off it all, right? Now, let's hold all those facts together.
And the pornography industry was run by Jews.
No, but it wasn't. That's like Nazi propaganda.
Well, one second. One thing at a time, right?
Well, I had this whole question thing.
One thing at a time. So the Versailles Treaty was true. Germany had been humiliated in World War I. It was bankrupt. There was a Great Depression happening across the whole world. Germans were starving. You have to know how desperate Germans were. They literally, the inflation was so crazy that you would literally take wheelbarrows to the marketplace. That's how ludicrous the money just dissolved in value. Everyone was unemployed. It was a terrible, terrible time for Germany, and people were furious negative. Meanwhile, this noises start coming across the Jewish bankers. Look how rich they all are. They've profited off World War I. That's true. So the non-Jewish bankers. Were Jews quite prominent backing it? Yes. Then, did you have anti-German Jews in places like Poland? Well, anti-Nazi party Jews for sure. Jews are the communists. Well, there were a lot of prominent communists who were Jews. Yes, that's true. But now, watch how you do. You build this picture. Suddenly, the Jews are the ones who destroyed Germany. You're all unemployed because of the Jews. Do all Germans agree with that? No. Lots of Germans say, what are you talking about? They fought with us in World War I. They're part of our culture and civilization. We're a modern, liberal, democratic society, etc. But slowly, people start to turn. Then this influencer turns. Then this legal opinion goes against the Jews. Then this university professor starts to say. And suddenly things that were unthinkable 10 years later are now debatable. 10 years after that, most people believe them. Now it just happens quicker. So, and a lot of these guys were charismatic people, fun people, intelligent people, and lots of clever things to say. Nick Fuentes is not unique. He's a likable guy. You want to go and have a drink with him. He's a smart guy. He's very straight with what he believes. He's not subversive. And that's part of his disarming charm. And he makes points. Now, all of these points have exaggerations. That it's very easy to show there's a problem. Your solution is often much worse than the problem. For example, I'll give you an example of this. One of the biggest, I don't want to be recorded with this. One of the biggest, no, you can record this, fine.
There we go.
I'm just going to sort of get in trouble in 10 years' time and society shits in other direction. I did research a few years ago because I was very interested in certain things in America. And I wanted to understand gun crime. And I started to do a lot of research into the stats and the causes and so on. And I realized that something very interesting. If you compare gun crime in America to knife crime in England, England has very little gun crime because the gangs don't usually have a lot of it's machetes, right? But the homicide rates are very similar.
The UK.
That's that. The homicide rates are very similar if you factor for one major factor. Homicide rates are much bigger. If you just look at gun crime rates, in America they're here, in England they're here. When you look at homicide rates, they come much closer. When you look at white homicide rates, they're identical.
Wow.
Right? Now you do get mass shootings in America, but they're statistically insignificant. They're horrific when you see them on the news. But they account for like 0.whatever% of crimes, gun crimes. Most of it's 2 meters away, one criminal shoots another, one gang member shoots another, which in England they just come 2 steps closer and machete each other. Right? So those are not the big differentiators. The biggest differentiator is black and white crime. Okay, even in England you got that by the way, but in England you've got a tiny black population, so the ghettoization is not the same degree. But America's biggest problem is black crime, black on black crime. That's the biggest problem. And if you look at every social issue in America, low social mobility, abortion rate, all these things. It's very much a huge difference in black and white. And the size of the black population drags all the stats down America, which means America has a problem. It's not worked out to equalize the black population. That's the basic problem for almost every major socialist in America. It's not the only problems they face, but those are huge problems. And here's the, so now, when you then start to look at causes, it's very complex because causes can self-iterate. However you get to a situation where the majority of black men are divorced and a high percentage of crime rates, that's going to produce a generation that's very poor, and it's, and you can get into poverty traps. But one of the interesting factors that used to be talked about till I think the mid-1990s, and then it disappeared, was, and early 2000s was the last time it got mentioned by someone in Harvard who then lost his job saying it, is there's an IQ gap between blacks and whites, which is actually sufficient to predict most of the poverty gap, okay? And I think it was, I forget it was Larry Summers, it was someone in Harvard said it and then got fired from their job. And he didn't actually mean it in a racist, disparaging way. He meant that's the problem we got to target. Can we close IQ gaps? And if we can't, can we find ways to change the economic fundamental structures so they don't, at the moment they're heavily biased towards IQ and less towards other things. Okay, for sports, fine, and blacks do better than whites in sport. But in other areas, the entire system is structured so it works better for a European type of brain. That was his argument. You can like it or not. He lost his job, and after that, it was never discussed in public discourse. Why was it not discussed? For a simple reason. People are afraid that if you do that, racist people are going to say, you see, blacks should all be slaves, or blacks should be lower class people, or we should segregate whites from blacks, which was fair. And because people were nervous, they subdued the data.
Is their IQ lower because they just don't have?
So that's a very good question. Is IQ malleable? To what extent is IQ nature? To what extent is it nurture? This should have been the national debate.
Yeah.
Right? For example, Irish Americans at one point had lower IQs than the general population and don't anymore. So is that because of intermarriage? Is it because of nurture? What is it? This will be an important issue to study if you want to help level the population. But the reason it had to be suppressed is because of the fear of racism. It would justify racism, so everyone went into denial. And yet people IQ tested themselves, culturally thing. Could be. It might be that the data's flawed. There's evidence that blacks raised in white homes do much, much better. There could be cultural, there could be lots of factors. The point I'm using, why am I using that example? You might even challenge me on this, all that data's wrong. It might be. It might well be. But the reason people suppressed that was for a good reason, because they were scared of what the racists will do with it. We can see what they're doing with it, but the problem is you cede the territory to the racists. And now you've got your Nick Fuentes popping in there saying, look at the IQ figures, right? But his conclusion is blacks should all be in jail, or blacks should all be this, or blacks should all be basically crushed by the white population, or banned from living, or I don't know what. But okay, now he's identified the problem. He's come up with a wacky solution. So if you try and implement that solution and you forget you have a civil war, right? Right, so he's identified that women vote differently from men, and women tend not to be as effective at thinking, tend to over-empathize situations that don't therefore give a good grasp of problems of large numbers of people.
That's why they can't be a witness in Torah.
Maybe, but the point is you understand an issue where that's true. Let's say if you show men and women a problem, healthcare system A helps 99% of the population. Healthcare system B helps 1%, but show them a picture of the child with a kidney infection who's treated better on B than A, they'll go for B, more than men will. So what's the conclusion? Fuentes' conclusion, ban them from the vote. Do you understand? So he takes real problems or real issues, and they may not even be problems, and then comes up with a solution that would solve the problem. It would just wreck the whole of society in the process. Right? Jews are disproportionately influential in movements you don't like. That's true. They're disproportionately influential everywhere. So any movement you don't like will have a disproportionate amount of Jews. What's the solution? Throw them all out of the country, kill them all. So these are the problems. So race. Everybody can point out something wrong or a fact. What happens is the gap between the fact and the solution is gigantic. Now, to solve the problem, so to get to an argument with someone, the easiest thing to do is deny the fact that they claim is true. There is no IQ gap. Women and men are exactly the same. They do the same. So that shortcuts the debate, but it leaves you vulnerable. If people do get hold of the real data, you're stuck. Really what we need to articulate is why, even if there is an IQ gap, that does not justify A, B, C, or D. It may be an argument for more affirmative action or for less. It may be an argument for A, B. Who knows what it is, right? But the fact that women and men vote differently, okay, but there's the minus is, let's say you have to argue the case of why given that, you should still have men voting and women voting. You might flip the case around. Empathy is really important in public decision making. If you don't, you kill 10% of the population to benefit 90%. Right? Good. So make the arguments. So that's the problem. We ceded that ground. Then some charismatic kid comes on, and when a lot of society is miserable and scared, like today,
And dumb.
but also there are real issues. People, because of social media, people are not happy to live in the same farmhouse they grew up in. That's A. B is people get into massive college debts and don't see pathways to wealth and home ownership. So that's a problem. You've got extremely low social media across society, and very, very strong, a lot of mental health problems going on. You've got people addicted to everything that's online. You've got a lot of stuff going on. Then throw on top of it Israel's at war and the greatest bombardment of media obsession. I told you, the first, somebody came up 2 weeks ago with an interesting study. In the first 9 months of the war in Gaza, the New York Times ran over 6,000 articles on the war.
Wow.
In the first 9 months, I think, of America's helping the Iraqi and Syrian and Kurds fight ISIS, where American soldiers were involved, they ran 80 articles. Wow. And that's quite true across every single media channel. In other words, Israel went to war, cameras on.
They're obsessed with us.
It's an obsession. 100 times, 80 times more coverage, all about civilian casualties, all about Hamas claims. So if you're just a normal person in America who's not very clued in, it's not crazy that you think Israel's doing terrible things. Right?
Israel is terrible.
And Iraq is okay, but by the way, with the best PR in the world, if there's an obsession with seeing you're going to be in trouble. If anybody covered any war like that, nobody would want to see it, right? The Vietnam War public support has gone from a few photos of napalm bombing, right? It's like so. If anybody covered the war against ISIS, you know how many people died in Mosul? The whole of Mosul was flattened to the ground after 2 years of fighting. So the official figures are 6,000 to 10,000 civilians died, and there was only 4,000 ISIS fighters there. Kurdish intelligence who were on the ground counting bodies said 40,000 civilians died. I mean, just think about that. It's like 40. That's like in Gaza, 250,000 civilians would have died for 25,000 Hamas fighters. It's scales we can't imagine, but there was no coverage. People understand war's horrible. We'll cover a few things here and there. We're not going to, get this like. Whatever. When Israel goes to war, it's like get every camera on everywhere. Come on, guys, pay $1,000 for every picture you get of a gruesome, blown up child.
Throw the ketchup too.
Right. So I'm saying so throw all this toxic mix together and throw a natural proclivity. It's all linked to the social pathology that almost lies in the subconscious of humanity. The Jews are responsible for what happens in the world, and therefore, when things are going bad, it's the Jews' fault. So now put all this mixed together and you have a very fertile ground for some kids in America by the millions who are frustrated with life, who it's the Jews' fault, and then you can say, look, we spent $3 billion a year on supporting the state of Israel. Imagine what we could do with that $3 billion. You know what the answer is? Nothing. Yeah. We've got a $6 trillion budget, $3 billion, you don't make $3 billion. It's like somebody complains about you spent $2 on chocolate when you've got $1,000 in debt or something. That's not your issue, right? You could up it $2 by yourself, nothing will happen. Nobody would notice if the American budget went up or down by $3 billion. Nobody notices that the America spends about $800 billion defending the rest of the planet Earth. It's amazing.
Have you seen a guy running his whole campaign in Florida in regards to how much money we send of Florida's money to Israel and how to bring it back and help schools or whatever? It's absurd. It's absurd
because Florida only invests. It's to make money for Florida. You know that. Florida doesn't do foreign aid.
No?
No, Florida can't do foreign aid. Only
They-
the government can.
The guy's running his whole
I know.
in Israel.
It's running his campaign. In fact, Florida has invested money in Israel like it invests its money in lots of other places because Israel's economy is doing very well, so it's good to invest.
Also, it's an investment.
Correct. Yeah. Florida can't send foreign aid. Florida, a state in America can't do foreign aid.
Mm-hmm.
Only federal government do foreign aid.
Yeah,
It's part of the federal things. But anyway, so I'm saying, so now, so you're asking me, throw all these together, does it give massive fuel to go? Of course it does. Anyone who's got an anti-Semitic voice is going to be amplified enormously and it's going to resonate. It will resonate very, very deeply with people. And that's a lot of, so throw that toxic mix together and you get what you got today. Yeah, who was had hands up first, yeah.
You good.
I just want to say you said something, you kind of like laid out how the kind of the manipulation, the way that things evolve so that the whole world gets to a point of saying Israel's at fault for this. That's really interesting because there's also a parallel in Judaism Kabbalistically that the outer world and the goy world is a reflection of how well the Jews are doing, that actually the entire world on the outside is a reflection of how well the Jews are doing in upholding.
I think that's true. I think that's
Right.
not wrong.
Right. So it's like that you just kind of explain like kind of the way that we see it play out in the rational, but it's all meant. That's all by divine design. Like it's
Sure.
all divine. Yeah.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
The very first thing Hashem told us is
Yeah.
you will be blessed, all the families of earth. He says it to Avram in the
Yeah.
beginning of Lech Lecha. He repeats it to Yitzchak after the Akedah. The Zarach, he says slightly differently. All the nations of earth will be blessed through your seed. He says it to Yaakov. Through you will be blessed all the families of earth and your seed. So we are the ones meant to bring bracha to the whole world. Right? God cares about all the people of the world,
Right.
not just Jews. But we're meant to be the channel for that. Which means when we're failing, the world fails.
Right.
And when it fails, it attacks us.
Right.
So in other words, we are. It's a very interesting. The subconscious spiritual programming that says the Jews are responsible for everything wrong in the world is
Right.
true.
And that's true.
Right, or at least not everything, but
Right.
right. How the wrong thing was then translated in an eruption,
Uh-huh.
right? So, and that's by the way where I think anti-Semitic conspiracies come from. I think it's almost like deep in the soul that the Jews felt Kennedy died, so there was conscious brain thinks, what's the link? Was Lee Harvey Oswald working for the Mossad? Right? So something's gone wrong, you know, and you get your complete crazy, like Candace Owens, like, did the snow melt? Oh, it's the Jews' fault, you know, type of thing. Literally, that was
Yeah.
this week's one.
Wow.
She makes
Wow.
the Fahrenheit and centigrade, and says 30 degrees according to the weather, and the snow's not melted, so that's not good. So, you know, the Jews are controlling the weather too. Or like having these anti-Semites saying the Jews control all our social media algorithms, while they're getting millions of views on the social media algorithms attacking Jews. So, but I think it's coming from a subconscious place,
Yeah.
which also means it's a subconscious cry of help.
Mm.
And part of our job when we listen to this is not just to keep fighting it, which we should do, but much more important is to get on with being a light for the world. And I think that, especially now that we have a state of Israel, we need to be thinking collectively how we can be shining the wisdom of the Torah for the whole world.
Yeah.
That's you know. Yes. So your
So
question.
yeah, my last question,
It's probably the last
it's
one we
more
have
of just
today.
like so I just want to basically, if you think about it, the future of politics, the future of really what it seems like every single candidate's going to be running on essentially is what is driving the media? What is the most persuasive thing? What is the most effective thing to stand on? And everybody's talking about it. And because 6,000 New York Times articles is just one example, but all over social media, you go to the comment section, Israel, 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 Israel. It's almost like a joke now between kids my age. It's like Israel this, Israel money, Israel banks. So literally, essentially the time we're living in, just like this mayor who's running on this whole concept of Israel, Mamdani, who just won, really just won because he was really anti-Zionist. And so basically it's like
It's a trend word.
it's a trend, but it's like Hitler was so powerful because he was so anti-Jew, right? There's always a Jew hater throughout the world. If it wasn't Hitler, it was oh my God, the Russian Stalin. After Stalin, Hussein. After Hussein, Khomeini. It's always the biggest thing is always the Jew hater.
Yeah.
And now it's taken over. It's literally like it's actually unbelievable. In front of our eyes is like it's not even about the just like anti-Semitism. It's about like this is how the world is it's like programmed into
The
the
world
world.
is completely obsessed with Jews, but they're not all haters. There's a lot
Oh,
of
yeah,
people
yeah,
who
of
love-
course.
there's a lot of
But
people-
even look at Trump. Trump is a Jew supporter. And
Right.
he's
Yes,
also,
yeah.
It's unbelievable stuff.
So we would love to be like every other nation on planet Earth. We would love, finally, after thousands of years, can we just be like everyone else? That's the dream was. Can we just be normal? And the world's saying, no, you can't.
And it's gonna happen. It's just showing in politics.
I've said this before. It's an amazing thing. If an alien came down from another planet and wanted to figure out what humanity is all about, you'll hear me say this many times, they would go to the UN and say, what do the world leaders talk about? What's their problems? When they all get together, they go, let's look at the last 10 or 15 years of UN resolutions. So, there's been 150 resolutions. A few of them about global warming, so that must be an issue people think about. A few of them are about famines, that's something, start with this, wars, genocide. Then there's one issue, the world that's the main issue. There's only one issue. 2/3 of all UN resolutions about one subject, which means that's the main issue of planet Earth. Humanity's main issue is there's a Jewish people not being good enough.
Unbelievable stuff.
Wow.
And you realize, I
Wow.
think that therefore that's why we got to get the message and become good enough,
Yeah.
internally and externally. This is what we have to do because that's what the world's telling us. As Shams told us, it's like you can't deny it. You can want, even if you're completely secular, or atheistic, the dream of Jews being treated like everyone else is clearly never going to happen. So it's about time we start to hear the voice of God and become the people of the Torah, the people through whom the whole rest of the world get blessed.
Rabbi, there'll never be another politician that doesn't run without talking about his vote. Never happen again. It'll never happen again.
Man. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.